I think this cycle is about offense. It's about expansion. It's about claiming, rhetorical, geographic, and demographic space that is available to us now that will hopefully, in the way I talk about it, get us to 55 nationally, up from 51, and make this election about a repudiation of MAGA.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Wilson, and you're listening to What the Gerrymander, brought to you by Who's Your Victory Alliance, an organization I co-founded. This podcast is our attempt to raise the alarm about the war MAGA Republicans are waging against Americans in Indiana and across the country. MAGA is implementing a strategy of voter suppression, gerrymandering, and cruel legislation to take away our freedom and increase their power. MAGA is using fascist tactics, corruption, conspiracy theories, and disinformation to make themselves and their billionaire funders richer and more powerful. They target the most vulnerable among us, but make no mistake, we and our children are targets too, whatever our gender, color, sexual orientation, or location. Across the country, the fascist MAGA party is forcing transgender kids and adults to detransition, greatly increasing the risk of suicide. MAGA is pushing gun ownerships for white Christians as part of their war and pretending to believe that more guns makes America safer. We know this is a vile lie, and our children are paying the price with their lives. And MAGA has systematically stripped bodily autonomy for women, first in red states and potentially nationwide. MAGA is banning books, and if they can't ban books, they're shuttering public libraries, defunding public education, and outlawing the teaching of the real history of America. All this is connected, and it's a war against you and me and all Americans who want to live in a pluralistic democracy. Who's Your Victory Alliance is sponsoring Blue Indiana, an organization that crowdfunds to run candidates in every legislative seat. Please help us launch the organization with a $10 recurring donation to HVA. If you enjoy listening, please also rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Today's guest is Simon Rosenberg, who has been a top Democratic operative for a long time. He founded NDN, a democracy research and advocacy group, in 1996. Recently, he started to believe that the United States is entering a new political era that requires new strategies and approaches. He created Hopium Chronicles as a way to tout positive messaging about Democrats in the United States. One of Hopium's projects is called Get to 55, that starts a big conversation in Democratic and pro-democracy circles about how to grow the current Democratic coalition from Biden's 51.4% in 2020 to 55% in 2024 and keep it there for a while. He joins us as part of his efforts to educate the grassroots on the economic successes of the Democratic Party and his mission of creating a grassroots army to fight MAGA. Today, we focused on the importance of Dems going on offense, of taking all the rhetorical and political real estate that we can and honoring our patriotism by fighting hard for our freedoms and our democratic way of life. Simon calls his new project the Hopium Chronicles, where Hopium is hope with a plan. It was wonderful to talk to him about all the ways that he, organizations like HVA, and you, our listeners, can participate in the fight to take back our country. Please listen and then think of ways that you express your patriotism and pride in our country. You could talk to people you know, participate in a voter registration drive, help fund Blue Indiana, or run for state office yourself. Lots of ways we can all contribute wherever we are and whatever we're capable of. Hello, Simon, and welcome to What the Gerrymander.
Stephanie, thanks so much for the opportunity.
Well, thanks for coming. So we're recording this on Thursday, and 2 days ago, Donna Deegan, a Democrat, was elected mayor of Jacksonville, Florida, shaking up the politics of Jacksonville. And also on Tuesday, Heather Boyd was declared winner of the special election in Pennsylvania, keeping a one-seat majority in the state house. So what did these wins tell us about the country's mood, where we are? Have the Republicans overplayed their hand? Are people going to now reject fascism? Or is this a mere stop on the road?
Well, we had another election too on Tuesday that really mattered, which was in Colorado Springs, which is like Jacksonville, a city that has been long controlled by Republicans over the last generation. Very few Democrats win there. And so in one night, we had Democrats prevail in two largely Republican cities, which was amazing. And I think what it shows us and what I believe about the moment that we're in is that the Republican extremism has pushed them away from the majority of the country, and that there is political real estate available to us that was not available to us before. We saw that in 2022 when we had this extraordinary performance in the battleground states where we got up to 59% in Colorado and 57% in Pennsylvania, 55 in Michigan, 54 in New Hampshire. We just got to 56% in Wisconsin in the Supreme Court race. And now we had these incredibly impressive and unexpected wins in Republican strongholds. And to me, what this means is that as Democrats, wherever we are, whether in Indiana or in Jacksonville, Florida, we have to have a go on offense mindset. We have to have an idea of expanding our coalition, taking away voters that weren't available to us before, reaching those voters, and also growing our coalition through, particularly by registering and engaging more young people who are overwhelmingly Democratic and more, even in states like Indiana, there's enormous opportunities there. So I think this cycle is about offense. It's about expansion. It's about claiming, rhetorical, geographic, and demographic space that is available to us now that will hopefully, in the way I talk about it, get us to 55 nationally, up from 51, and make this election about a repudiation of MAGA and to start to loosen its dark grip on the Republican Party, which would be good for the country. It'd be good for us. It'd be good for the Republicans, in my view, as well, to have, the extremism that's overtaken their party to start to loosen so they could be something more recognizable as a center-right party again. So I'm very optimistic about what we're seeing. And I think what we've seen this year is a continuation of the overperformance that we saw in the 2022 election. The conditions are the same. They haven't changed. They're too crazy. We've done a good job. Our grassroots is giving us the money and the volunteerism that's allowing us to operate at sort of the highest, to push our performance to the highest possible level. And, we're a year and a half out. Things look pretty good. We got a long way to go, but I'd much rather be us than them today.
One of the things, though, within the country is I think you see a pretty dramatic split between the battlegrounds where we're gaining ground and the hardcore entrenched MAGA captured areas, like Indiana, Tennessee, all those places.
Yep.
And everyone I talk to, Gen Z is going to be the savior, which is a horrible thing to put on an entire generation, but really the way it's going to work. So in a lot of places like this, with a lot of gerrymandering and voter suppression, you get a lot of people who are either, screw them all, they're all terrible, which we know is deeply problematic and wrong. And a lot of people whose vote has just never counted. And so I'm interested in hearing how you think we could engage those people. Also, the Gen Z in Indiana did not come out in the 2022 elections. Right. Do you have thoughts on how we can?
Yeah. So my thoughts are that there's only so many tools available to us, right, to execute our politics. It's the basic unit of politics is a politician pitching a voter. I mean, that's sort of the essential activity of our business. And everything sort of derives from that. And we're pitching voters through social media or through canvassing or through television ads or through the evening news, right? It's all about taking your values, your ideas, your sensibilities, and bringing it to people in all the ways that we have that are available to us. And I think that my general advice is that this cycle, we need every Democrat and every Democratic community needs to be maximally aggressive and to try to get as much real estate as we can now while it's available to us, because it's available. And we know through what happened in Kansas, for example, when a ballot initiative was put on the ballot, that we saw the Republican coalition splintering and people walking away from the Republican position on abortion. Now, every state is going to have their own set of issues. And so I don't want to dictate, I'm a national guy and I don't want to tell you how to do your business in Indiana. However, I think that is universal, is that I think for many Americans, the issue of abortion is a bridge too far. the gun violence has become too much. I think the questions around the diminution of our democracy and sort of the sense that the Republicans have become disrespectful to democratic traditions is also a big problem for them from a brand standpoint. And I think it just means that I think there's this sensibility in the electorate that they've gone a little crazy and that an extremism has taken over the party for now, not forever, right? But it has for now. And it's loosened some of the parts of the Republican coalition, but only if we go get it.
Right.
I mean, it's not going to be handed to us. And I also think that the opportunity with young people is really under 45, not just Gen Z. I think it's a broader universe, and a little bit as you get older, it gets a little bit less democratic. But it's still, the under 45 vote in the last several elections has been bouncing around between plus 10 and plus 18, meaning that in Indiana, the under 45 vote is probably break even, or a little bit even slightly Democratic. And so there's a lot of gold in them hills there, so to speak. And, every state has to make their decision about how they go get it. And I'll just say the last thing I'll say for those of you who are in your states where it feels like it's too daunting and it may be too hard, you got to start somewhere and you got to go claim as much real estate as you can. I mean, places like Georgia and Arizona went from being red states to purple or even lean blue states because they had 10-year programs, right?
Exactly.
That made the electorate where they were working to register and engage voters all year round, and that they built every 2 years. They had goals and they kept going. And it was not something that happened overnight. You should have 2-year goal, ambitious goals this cycle, depending on, where you have opportunities in the legislature and statewide and so on, and go as far as you can. I mean, it's all you can do, right? But you can't score unless you shoot. And unless we try and plan a politics around this expansion, we won't be able to take advantage of the opportunity that I think that's been given us. And I think that part of what I'm trying to do in my new Substack at Hopium Chronicles is to help arm Democrats to tell the story about the good that we've done as a party and to help paint a more positive picture of our historic contribution to the country and in both over time and in recent years. And I think we have a very compelling story to tell, but unless we tell it, unless we're aggressive and using all the ways that we reach people. And so I talk about how we need to learn how to get louder as Democrats. They're very loud. I mean, the right-wing noise machine on their side is a very powerful force. It helps push around the daily discourse and help determine how we, discuss things every day. We have to learn how to get louder, and it's through podcasts and social media and events. And, there's only so many ways, right? I mean, to do it. But we have to use all those ways, and we have to be aggressive, and we have to not assume that people are going to hear us because we're virtuous and good. They have to hear us because we're hungry and we're fighting and we're, being gritty and leaving it all on the playing field. And, that's a sensibility that we need to have if we want to take advantage of the opportunity we have this cycle.
I couldn't agree more. In these states where it's not as advanced, those 10-year programs were at the beginning. We have to take advantage of moments like they did in Tennessee, like Zoe Zephyr did in Montana, like happen here and there, and then make them go viral, make them part of the national conversation so that we get a little zest of optimism, but we also get the idea that actually acting out and breaking up this whole notion of civility can be a good thing. Going on offense, essentially.
Well, and if I can add to that, because I think it's really important, what you're saying is that in a state like Indiana, many people who share your values may think it's not worth it, right? We can't ever win. Mm-hmm. They're going to be in charge forever. And you need to create a permission structure for those people to start speaking out and engaging. And it's why, the Zoom-based world that we live in now, where you can do meetings with hundreds and hundreds of people, thousands of people across the state. They don't have to leave their house. These things really matter. I think one of the things that you've seen across the country is this explosion of the grassroots in the Democratic Party is in part because of Zoom and the ability for you to be on a Zoom with somebody like me, right, talking about all this stuff, and you're making dinner for your kids. And, if you had to go and see me at a Democratic Party meeting down the street, you couldn't do that if you had to make dinner for your kids. And so I think Zoom has created access to the political conversation and politics to hundreds of thousands or millions of people that just wouldn't have been able to access all of this before, because not everyone's going to read blogs and read things. Some people just are listen to podcasts and want to see live people, and so I'm very encouraged. I mean, I think the key thing we have to do, the sensibility that we have to have now, is that, Joe Biden's been a good president. The country's better off. The Democratic Party is strong. And so when we go make the case to people, what will probably happen in many cases, Stephanie, is that people will say, "Where have you been? I haven't heard from you." and Tip O'Neill told us a long time ago that you can't expect anybody's vote unless you ask for it. And,
right.
Unless we're self-organizing, and every state has to do this on their own, like the kind of work that you're doing, this isn't going to be done for you by anybody. No one's going to come in and save the day. There's not going to be a $5 million check from the National Party. I mean, the stuff that happened in Georgia and Arizona was all self-organized. They took responsibility themselves to do as well as they could, right? The key thing is that if you start changing things and it makes it look like you're a little bit more competitive, then, if you're a 34-year-old transplant and your boss is a Republican and you think you're going to be Republican, but, the Democrats are starting to win some elections, maybe I'll go hang out with them, right? That's how this stuff really happens. And so, having a good cycle, whatever that is critical to then creating another good cycle and creating this virtuous, what I call a virtuous cycle of participation, where, the success that you have breeds more success. It's what Tim Snyder in his, I'll show it to you, my favorite book. This is my home book of Hopium, Chronicles, is, his first chapter, his lesson about fascism is do not obey in advance. And I think in a lot of red states right now, there are a lot of people obeying in advance who don't necessarily want to, but it's just what is happening. And so breaking that sense of passivity in the sense that it's inevitable is critical, which is why what happened in Jacksonville and why I work so hard in that race is that going into a state that's so important to us nationally, Trump and DeSantis are both from there, to go in and go flip the biggest city, a Republican city, right as DeSantis is announcing for president, is an enormous blow to them. And I will tell you, my friends in Florida, nobody believed we could win there. And they were like, "Simon, thanks so much, but Simon, we're not really going to win, but I appreciate what you're doing, because they had Stockholm syndrome, right? I mean, they were so beaten down, they couldn't believe. And so when she won, I can't tell you what this has meant to the people and the Democrats in Florida who now feel like we got to pulse, we got to fight, we got to go. Biden's got ads on the air there, right? And I think this is all possible, but you can't score unless you shoot. And it's about taking the risks, going for it, and being guided by love of country and by a sense that we're in a time of enormous crisis. And we as proud patriots have to take some risks and do things that are hard because it's what's right for the country.
I think the idea, I call it the Wayne Gretzky theory of politics, even though I don't actually watch hockey, you lose 100% of the shots that you don't take, is super important in these states where it really does feel so hopeless. And one of the things I think is really important is competing for every seat in the state. I mean, that's the level where they're starting. It's not even necessarily how many they're going to win. It's showing up. And I think you have to start showing up before. And I think people don't necessarily realize how much time has gone into Arizona and Georgia and Wisconsin and Michigan and all those places that have begun to be battleground states.
And the term hopium is a term that confuses people, but for me, what it means is hope with a plan, right? It's the idea that if there's something you want to achieve, hope is insufficient. It needs to be hope with a plan, and that plan, well executed, can change the future. And that's what we did in 2022. It's what we just did in Jacksonville and Colorado Springs, is that these were things that were possible, and hope is insufficient. Hope is passive. You need a plan. You need to execute. You need to go fight for it. And for me, what hopium is that action, that sense that we can, through our good work, change the future of the country, or change Indiana, or change this community and that we're not going to give up, right? We're not going to let, our country slide into autocracy, and we've already proven that. I mean, we defied history in 2022 through Hopium,
Mm-hmm.
right? Through this sense that weren't just hoping for a better future. We were going to go work to make it so.
Right.
And that's the sensibility that has to come into people in places like Indiana. And look, I recognize that these are Hobbesian choices that people have to make about what to do with their lives, and that dedicating work to go build a Democratic Party in a place where it may not be successful versus coaching Little League or, making dinner for your family or all the other
Right.
options you have. These are tough choices for real people. I mean, this is not simple, right? This is not,
Mm-hmm.
is it worth my time is a legitimate, serious matter. I've raised 3 kids. You're under insane pressures every day to find the balance between being a good parent and being a fulfilled adult, and
Mm-hmm.
how you can create more meaningful engagements for people. And I think what you're doing in this podcast, for example, is a great example, which is you're giving people options of how to engage. Some people like to write postcards. Some people like to canvas. Some people like to text and phone. Some people like to spread good information. It's all good. It's all taking these little steps towards making our democracy better and our country better that matters so much when you're doing it with many other. And I think people need to feel that they're not alone, that they're part of a national community that's working to make things better. And I can tell you that as part of my journey in the last year, I've spoken to groups all over the country, tens of thousands of people at Zoom-based gatherings. And I
Mm-hmm.
can tell you that anyone listening today, you are part of an incredible community of people, proud patriots who love their country, who are taking time out of their day to try to make things better. There's been a grassroots, I get often asked, why aren't we seeing the kind of protests we're seeing in Israel, for example? Because our protests are happening through our elections and through all the money that's being raised and all the grassroots activity that's happening. And I promise everyone who's listening today that if you have a good plan next year, you're going to be able to seize some political real estate that you weren't able to get. If you've got good candidates, you do the work, you raise the money. But it is work. It's hard, but it's what's needed now. And, whatever I can do to help you in the journey ahead, Stephanie, please let me know. And you are part of a big burly community around the country as you're helping bring many of these leaders into your discussion, right? You're
Right.
helping expose the folks of Indiana that they're not alone, and that they are part of a national effort to defeat MAGA and ensure that freedom and democracy prevail.
I think that's so important for people to hear. And I think also one of the things that you're doing, and one of the things that I've been really dedicated to doing through Who's Your Victory Alliance and the nonprofit I started before that, and I was part of the Biden Digital Coalition, is to give people the tools that they need. A lot of people say, well, what am I supposed to say? How am I supposed to say it? Well, how can I make a difference? And what you're doing by giving people the information, what we're doing with helping people with the messaging, or helping field candidates, or helping to teach them how to actually run a race. Giving people the tools to change everything, I think, is one of the more important things. And I'm really glad that you're out there, and also that you're willing to talk to all these groups. I mean, I think a lot of times people out here in the grassroots feel like there's a grassroots layer, and then there's the elite layer, and never the twain shall meet. And having you come on our Little But Growing podcast, as well as some of the other people we have, I think gives people hope that they are part of the collective. So that's a really important. And
Well, you are. I mean, you're patriots, right? And there's millions of
right.
us getting up every day, going to work. And I think what I'm trying to do with Hopium is to provide a deeper set of understandings, right? I mean, I'm not necessarily going to produce the tweet that you're going to send to your friends. I'm really trying to help inform people's understandings of politics and the nature of the fight that we're in, and the way that those of us I've been doing this for over 30 years full time, the way that people in the inside who work on national campaigns and devise strategy, the way that we do it, right? I mean, I'm sort of pulling the curtain back, the system in Washington, and opening it up to anyone who wants to engage with it. And so even today, the post that I did about the Biden strategy memo, for those who follow my work, you'll notice that there are ideas and themes in that Biden strategy memo that may seem familiar to those of you who read Hopium. And that's because I'm an active political strategist who's actually engaging with the Biden people. A bunch of the senior Biden campaign folks have worked for me at various points. I'm good friends with Julie Chavez Rodriguez, who's the new campaign manager. And, they read all my stuff. And so the same stuff you're reading is being read in the White House and the DNC and the committees. And I'd like to believe that I had a little bit of influence in what you read today. And because it was all about expansion and growth and being louder and all the things that we talk about, because it's what needs to be done. I mean, there isn't some kind of magic secret sauce here. I mean, I've just been doing this a long time, and this business is actually in many ways far simpler than people understand, and maybe as you get older, you do get to the other side of complexity and, can see things a little bit more clearly than when you're younger and in the beginning of your journey through life. But it's just very clear what we have to do now to me. And I'm very confident that we can be successful. And I was very confident that we were going to have a much better election than everybody thought we were going to do. And I was attacked viciously by the insider community in Washington. It was amazing to me that people who had been friends of mine and colleagues had, publicly tried to not challenge me with data, but to impugn my integrity and to mock the work that we were doing, to call it hopium, right? To say that I was living in this delusional place. And the delusional people were the political commentators on television and the Republicans. I mean, we were the people in touch with the real data. And what's important to me is that this period of strength, when we're on offense and we're growing, has now continued. And what I've believed in my heart is that the reason why a place like Jacksonville would be open to us is that I think people are aware that the Republicans, they've gone a little crazy. They're going too far, right? The sense that they've kind of lost their way. We, as Democrats, use more stronger language oftentimes when we say it. But in terms of polite company, when you're in a room of people that include Republicans, this sense that this is a party that's lost its way is indisputable now. It's indisputable. It was the central driving thing in 2018, 2020, and 2022. I think it's escalating. I think once DeSantis sort of chose to be super MAGA and not just a tax-cutting Republican governor, he reinforced that the problem that we're seeing with MAGA is a party-wide problem. It's not unique just to Trump. It's everybody. Because now the boy wonder, the alternative is just as MAGA, in some ways more MAGA than Trump. And so it means that reinforced that this is something that's gone wrong with the Republicans and not just with one man. And I think people see that. And so what happened was, here you had in Florida, the guy who was running for mayor in Jacksonville, was the head of the Chamber of Commerce, very prominent, civic-minded Republican, backed by DeSantis. DeSantis is from that region of the state. He outspent our candidate 4-1 in a state that we were wiped out in 2022. And it's because the legislative session that just took place with DeSantis, he pushed in a state that is not a red state. It's a state that has a long history of multiracial democracy. It's one of the most racially diverse states in America, a welcoming state to outsiders, and both immigrants and people moving there from other places in the country, a long history of open government and good government in Florida. He's pushed Florida to a place that's outside of its comfort zone. And we know that from polling, right? His 6-week abortion ban is only in the 20s in polling. The permitless carry that he passed is only in the 20s in Florida, not nationwide, but in Florida. And so there was this Jacksonville vote was a referendum on the new Ron DeSantis. And just like with Disney, right, he's failed. This was a massive failure for Ron DeSantis right before he declares for president. And, over the weekend, he ran into Kentucky to endorse in the Republican primary for governor. And he ran in there on the final weekend, made this late endorsement. His candidate finished third. So he's had a really bad week. And I just want to say for everyone listening is that one of our jobs this year, I think if I could give everyone sort of a universal job, one is I think we have to launch a national voter registration drive for younger Americans. Democrats should not accept that the part of our coalition that is most Democratic votes the least. We've got to change that. Second is we need to win this economic argument with the Republicans. The only major issue that people vote on where Republicans are in good shape is the economy. If we can take that away from them in the next 12 months, it will be very difficult for them to win next year. And the third thing is in the next few months is we cannot let Ron DeSantis out of the extremist box. He's made his decision. He's among the most extreme politicians in the history of America. He didn't have to be that, but he chose to be that. That was his choice. He went from a 15-week abortion ban to a 6-week abortion ban. And we cannot allow what's going to happen. We'll all have Republican friends who are going to say, oh, he's not that bad. He just did it to get elected. There's going to be all these justifications of none of that is true. I mean, he has removed democratically elected officials from their positions in a manner that is wildly undemocratic and un-American. He's banning books. He's pushing the 6-week abortion ban. He's a radical figure, and we can't let any of the efforts to put lipstick on the DeSantis pig happen in the next few months. And so that's another important universal job I think that we all have.
One of the ways in that people can understand it is what Ron DeSantis does in Florida is what all of the states are going, or at least the ones with either a MAGA governor or a majority or supermajority in their state legislatures. It's not about Florida, and it's not about just an abortion ban. It's not just about trans kids. It's not just about guns. It's not just about public education. It's about all of those things at once. And I think that wakes people up more than anything is that we're not fighting individual policy battles. We're fighting an entire way.
Yeah, it's MAGA. The Republican Party is no longer a conservative party. Its ideology has been replaced with MAGA. MAGA is an extremist ideology. And let me give you an example that's very current, which is the debt ceiling and the discussion on the debt ceiling. The Economist magazine, not exactly a left-leaning publication, wrote several weeks ago that the debt ceiling efforts by Kevin McCarthy would, whether we enacted the cuts that he was proposing or breaching the debt ceiling and defaulting, either one of those options would be devastating for the global economy. Yes. So the Republican Party, in a time when the country has just come out of COVID, inflation's clearly coming down, job growth is still strong. We've had the strongest economic recovery of any advanced economy in the world, right? We've come out of this pretty well compared to other places. The country has come through this thing pretty well. Things are getting better. And right at this moment where it looks like we may get to the other side of the inflation challenge, Republicans are not helping us get there. They're actually trying to blow up the American economy and the entire global economy to achieve what? To achieve something that would also devastate the American economy and the global economy. They've given us two bits of poison to take. Right. Why would you ever do that? Why, as a proud patriot, why, as an American who loves your country, would you ever offer the president two options, both of which would be devastating to the interests of the American people in the country? Why would you do that? I would argue that for all the ways that you define the extremism of MAGA, what we're witnessing now may be the most dangerous manifestation other than the attack on the Capitol itself. And all of this has been normalized as somehow kind of this is normal legislative maneuvering. Kevin McCarthy has the capacity to essentially destroy the United States in the next few weeks. Why? Why would anybody do that? Why would anybody who cares about their country? And it's because MAGA doesn't care about our country. They don't care about the United States. They don't care about and love their country the way that we do. This is not an alternative form of patriotism. This is something that is about betrayal and about abandoning the things that made us great. This is an incredible threat to the United States. And we thought we'd gotten through the manifestation of Trump. And then we had the insurrection, another threat to the republic. And then we had another great election. And here we are yet again in this place where this dark political ideology of MAGA is threatening the integrity and the global standing of America. Bloomberg's cover story that just came out is about denigration of the global American brand and how we may never recover from this. If that happens, this is all the Republican Party's fault. It's all by putting our Trump forward and pursuing things like this. Joe Biden just had to cut his trip short to Asia, which was done to counter the Chinese, which is supposedly something the Republicans care about, in order to come here and deal with the crisis that they're creating. That's a manufactured, unnecessary crisis. And so the level of their betrayal to the American project is deep and continuing and disappointing. And this is why we're here and why we have to keep doing the work, because we all deserve better than this. And there's urgency to this work that we're doing together, Stephanie. And I think that I'm grateful for what you do. I appreciate you taking time to help bring your fellow citizens along in this journey. I'm glad to be here. But I will tell you, this debt ceiling fight, to me, is another one of those moments like the red wave where the media has been unable to grasp and deal with the manipulation and the BS that's coming from them. And that it's almost like the national media has become not a truth-telling machine, but a normalization of extremism machine. Mm-hmm. And it's worrisome to me. And it's why I'm fighting so hard. And I'm doing, I'm working harder. I'm not young anymore. I used to be young. I'm not anymore. And I'm working harder today than I've probably worked in a long, long time, because I feel this sense of urgency. I feel this sense of opportunity that we have, and that we have to be successful. To use your Gretzky analogy, is that, we need to take the shots because we need to win. And you can't win unless you take the shots, right? And that's what we need to do. And so I'm gratified for our time today. Appreciate the work that you do, the thoughtfulness in which you do this work. And let's hold hands together and, go fight MAGA and make sure we take as much political real estate as we can in the coming months.
Well, thank you so much for coming on and standing with us and helping to fight the war against both the American project, as you say, but against Americans themselves, ourselves. And which is even more depressing. But I think this hopium, the hope being a verb, an action, a plan, I think that is one of the most important things. And I really appreciate all the work that you're doing on it.
Can I add one last thing, just to end on a slightly more upbeat note? I think about, what am I doing, right? Why am I taking all this time? What's motivating me? What's my source of energy, right, for this? In addition to being with people all around the country who I'm watching do the work, I go back to 1941 and the speech that FDR gave at his State of the Union, where he laid out his four freedoms idea, and that he wanted a world that had been at war due to authoritarianism and autocracy, that he wanted a world that wasn't about dominion and wasn't about authority, but was a world that was built around freedom. And he laid this simple vision out, this very powerful vision, probably the most important speech ever given in American English. And because it became the vision that built the world after World War II. Right. And the four freedoms became the foundational narrative of the UN Charter and in all the international agreements that we had that built this world, this liberal international order that was imagined and built after World War II. And that world that we've been living in, those of us who are older for most of our lives, has created a golden age for humankind. There's never been a time where more people have lived in democracies, or you've seen lifespans explode and poverty decline and people having incredible opportunities to achieve their dreams in ways that are unprecedented in all of human history. What's important is that for your listeners is that the Democratic Party did that. We did that. Right. That world in the golden age, the Pax Americana, this period we're living in, the global liberal order, we built that. That was something we did. We are probably connected to the most important political actions taken by a group in all of human history. There's never been a political party that has created more opportunity for more people than we have, which is why we have to so virulently defend this global system that we built to its challenges that are coming from the Russians and the Chinese, the Iranians and others, and why what's happening in Ukraine matters so much, and why it's so important that we prevail here at home. And so the work that we're all part of here is among the most noble work that we could possibly do. We are part of this thing that's created such extraordinary opportunities for people, and we've got to fight to preserve it, because That's the world that we imagined. It's the right vision for humanity. And I conclude by saying I was so excited to see Joe Biden making freedom his foundational narrative and story that he was telling, because it ties it right back to FDR in 1941, that foundational democratic value that defines our modern party is more freedoms versus less freedoms. Joe Biden is off to a very good start. I'm really encouraged by his campaign, and I look forward to getting this done with all of you in the next year and a half.
Thank you. We look forward to getting it done with you as well.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Thanks for listening to What the Gerrymander. We're working toward building Blue Indiana and ask that you make a small recurring donation at HoosierVictoryAlliance.org. If you like what you heard today, please subscribe and leave a review wherever you get your podcasts. We thank you, and democracy thanks you.